composability doesn't just come without challenges, right? There are challenges when rolling out a solution. And so let's talk about a few of these. The first one is extra time evaluating each component. So let's say you have a system with marketing automation, a CRM, a CMS, e-commerce. Each one of those is a different vendor to deal with and work with. So maybe you have to evaluate the product, you have to do legal, maybe there's security for each one of them, there's contract reviews and renewals for everyone. So there is more administrative work to evaluate all those platforms. And that's just something you can't get across. Now, I will argue that things like evaluating the needs or the features of each product, you should be doing on a monolith too. When you roll up with a monolith, you should be checking all those subcomponents and looking at the requirements of each. The problem is normally purchasing a monolith is led by one of those divisions, let's say the content management team or the e-commerce side, and they look at a lot of those features, but oh, they have personalization. Oh, it just has it. Perfect. I won't even dig into that. So you don't dig in as deep. So I would argue a little bit on this one. That extra time allows you to get better analysis into each focused kind of pillar. But the legal security contract reviews, that is eating up time that's kind of separate per system. So that is something you just have to be aware of.
And I think that leads us into, once you've actually selected the components, the pieces of this system that you want, how they're not all created equally. And I think that we're going to see more standardization moving forward in terms of how things integrate together. But at this point, some systems are more complex to do that with than others. Some things are pre-built in terms of connectors. Some things you kind of got to roll your own at this point. It can get so that integration is more complex than you wanted it to be. And I think that's a good point that's at the point when you look at something and go, oh, we need to swap that component out because it doesn't play well with others, or it doesn't play well with this other thing that we need. That's, with our marketing automation platform that we were using, that was literally, we had like a Zapier hell, I think we were in. Trying to connect these things together, but we had kind of rolled it all ourselves. I know I had, seen some code that was connecting these things, and it was a little crazy. So that to me, it's like, okay, we need something that plays a little bit better with how we need it to work. And it's not necessarily that the system was a bad system. It's just how it worked with the other systems that were important to us didn't work. And I think that's a really important sort of thing to look at, not just in the evaluation phase, but on an ongoing basis. How well do these things continue to play well together?
But I do think that this is the area, Joel, that I would say a lot of systems that are pushing composability and built, headless systems, API first systems, they are really, really working on this one right now. And we're seeing every month new things come out, new ways of, making these integrations more seamless, more standardization, all those type of things that we talked about, which kind of moves into this point here. If we would switch over here. Which is standardization.
Yeah. So, and I think you're going to see a lot more, just you're saying, you're going to see a lot more standardization. I mean, I know that when we build new APIs and things, and when we build connectors with other systems, we're starting to see, first of all, vendors are starting to talk to each other, just like the teams are talking to each other more about how to work better together. And you are starting to see, I don't know whether orchestration won't solve all of this, but it'll certainly help with this, because there will be the idea of, we want to interop with other systems, and so we want this to work well for our customers, and that standardization is going to come. You're going to see sort of starter systems of like, hey, this is how you install these 3 packages together as part of one system, because it's so commonly done, and hopefully get through some of these challenges. So I think that's something we're going to see evolve very, very quickly.
Yeah, and again, just as a summary, if built incorrectly, a composable kind of, the idea of a composable solution is no better than a monolith. So when you're working with the development teams, when you're working with your system integrator, do they have the experience of rolling out a composable solution? And are they building it in a way that maintains composability, maintains those 3 parameters that we talked about in the previous slide around modularity, abstraction, and what was the other one? The I forget right now. But those
modularity, interoperability.
Yeah, are they maintaining those as they build the solution? Because if they don't, you're locking yourselves into something that is more like a monolith. Now, I still think there's benefits of having best of breed solutions for your specific needs, even if they are very locked together. It may be just difficult to swap one out down the road. So I still think you're ahead, but you really have to make sure that this is considered and get the right partner or the right development team to keep that in mind.
And I think there's a point that we didn't write here, but it's really important to kind of understand that composable solutions, it doesn't necessarily dictate the technology of that solution or even how it's built. The idea is you can still maintain the principles of it and build it in a lot of different ways. And I think the example of Prime Video, they just released a report on sort of moving away from serverless. So you would think that's moving away from a composable sort of microservices kind of thing back to, kind of more of like a bare metal thing. That was a cost and a management piece of their development. But that just saying we're going to do that doesn't mean this whole concept doesn't work. Just because it didn't work for them in terms of cost and manageability of their code and their sort of execution of a particular problem, your solution, I'm going to guarantee, is going to be much different from Prime Video, unless we have Netflix watching and trying to learn about that. So we probably don't. So I'm going to guess that for most organizations, composable solutions are the way to go. Usually that's going to use some more modern types of technologies, but what those technologies are is a different discussion from whether composability is good or not.
Yeah. And Aaron just had a little comment saying, we're using agility itself in a little bit of a monolith sense. We're currently using it as a headless config engine, which somewhat goes against the idea of true composability. So what I'd like to expand here a little bit on is, and we will have another session coming up, monolith versus composable solutions, and comparing them like directly to each other. Just because you take a component and lock it in, or you use it in a way that maybe isn't totally true composability, it doesn't necessarily make it a monolith. So a monolith is when you have, search built into the CMS, you have e-commerce built in, market automation built in. You have all these components built in as a whole thing. What I think you're saying, Aaron, here a little bit is more the sense that you're losing some of the benefits of composability by locking in configuration or things that that are needed as a foundation across all of your platforms or all of your things. And that's something we can sit down with you and chat about more and look at the architecture and say, how can you make this a little bit more modular or a little bit more abstracted so we can pull those things out and make them a little bit cleaner. Now, if you take that headless configuration engine component and put it into certain content models that are very well defined, it might be very easy for you to pull those out and put them in another system, or maybe it really separates it. So also how you do your content modeling and your content architecture can make you have those benefits of abstraction and those things, even though it's within the CMS. So Is it easy to swap out? Is it easy to change? Are the two questions that you want to ask yourself? And sometimes that comes down to your content modeling, and why our next session, which is composability and why content architecture is so important, is really, really going to be a great discussion, because again, you have to architect properly, and the modeling is the foundation of that across not just CMS, all your systems.